On Your Farm, a weekly review of the agricultural scene, introduced this week by Anthony Parkin.
Hello. Last month, one of the best-known characters in British agriculture died, Tom Parker of Hampshire. He was 86. He'd often said that when the time came he'd like to drop off his horse dead, and he almost managed it. He rode around his farm at Droxford in the morning and died suddenly and peacefully after his bath that night. This morning, as a tribute to one of the most famous farmers of the century, we're going to repeat the conversation David Richardson and I had when we visited the Guv'nor, as he was always known, for breakfast in 1971. At that time he was farming around 4,000 acres in Hampshire with his two sons, real mixed farming with 800 dairy cows, 100,000 laying hens, 1,000 ewes, along with corn, potatoes, Brussels sprouts and one or two other things. Mr. Parker had met us at the door, straight as a pitchfork in spite of his 76 years, and wearing the familiar bow tie, which was one of his hallmarks. He then proceeded to carve us a huge plate of cold ham apiece, and settled down to tell us his story. We started with his obsession with coaching, which had taken him to many parts of the country. He was a familiar figure, for example, in the Grand Ring at the Royal Show, where people stood in silence last month in his memory. What, we asked him, was the attraction?
You've got to remember that I was brought up in horse age. We never had any horses and steam engines till I was 24, 5.
Most people were only too glad to see the back of them.
Not the old traditional sort, weren't. I appreciate what you say, because they're liable to get their foot in the wrong place, but not a traditional man doesn't. And we, at this one time, we were working 30 horses in a retail business, and a man gave me a coach.
Milk retailing?
A milk retail business, and a man gave me a coach, and then he wanted to help me put a horse to coach. And I said, all right, and we went at this one Sunday afternoons, and then I found by coincidence that I had a man looking after these horses who knew everything about the coaching world and about coaching horses, where every strap went and everything else. Well, they'd give me the harness, they'd give me the coach, and eventually I put four together and we went to the Royal County Show at Portsmouth.
Is it easy to drive?
It's a lot easier than it looks. It's a lot easier than it looks.
Helps a bit if you've been driving a plough, I think, with horses in the old days.
Oh, yeah. Often people say to me, where'd you learn to drive? I drive in 4-horse plough for my father.
Yeah. Must be a pretty expensive job, though, this coaching. You've got your horses to run, you've got to look after them and groom them and goodness knows what.
This is all true, but this works into a picture, and you don't earn any money keeping a wife. That's no way to earn money, so I do both.
How many horses have you got these days?
Well, I don't know, we got about 5 or 6. We use them for riding about the farms, and they do a few odd jobs on the farms, but in the main, we keep them in the winter to ride.
You do much riding yourself now?
Oh, every day.
Do you
every
really?
day, and I got this one son rides too.
I think you could ride quite a long way without going off your own land, couldn't you?
Well, it's most interesting. I now and then set off, and I do about 25 mile round our farm, with very few exceptions of getting on a road.
Yeah.
No more than 2 mile, there and back. I'm not always on our own land, but other people's land and our own and byways, and it's quite a thing to do.
It's a rude question, Mr. Parker, but you're riding, you're very active, of course. How old are you?
I'm 76 my next birthday.
And you still ride every day?
Oh, Lord, yes. Riding a horse I bought in Ireland in July now with 5-year-old.
When did you give up hunting?
I haven't given up. I go now and then.
Do you?
I haven't got so much courage as I had, I'll accept that, but, I'm not so fond of leaving the ground as I was, but when your blood's up, you don't stop.
Take us back to those early days, Mr. Parker. You say your father was a farmer. But, I mean, was he in a big enough way of business to put you into a start? Did he get you going?
I often tell people that my father farmed 500 acres. And he was never, before the first war, he was never worth £1,000. Now it just makes you wonder how it was done, but it was done. They settled up with everybody after harvest, the grocer, the harness maker, the blacksmith, and everybody else. And then I presume they went on the next year till they had harvest and settled up again.
What was your first job?
I left school when I was 14 and a half, and I remember it was yesterday. My old father said, get to bed in good time because the carter will call you at 4 o'clock. And it was 4 o'clock from then on. In the summer, 5 o'clock in the winter. Had to be in stable. And the old man was there to see they were there. There was no dodging the column. Until I was shepherd at another time, but I still had to do my horses at 4 o'clock, and then go with the sheep, and then a day man drove my team. And I had to do them again when they came in at night.
So you had a fairly hard start.
I didn't think so. I loved every minute of it.
This was what, ploughing an acre a day?
Oh yeah, that was the yardstick. And if you were harrowing, you had to harrow 2 acres for every foot the implement took. Oh yes, the yardstick was laid on every day.
You yourself, I mean, where did you begin? You started off, as you say, just driving horses for your father, and he had no money to get you going. So where did your break come?
Well, now, to get this thing in proportion, I didn't want any money. I didn't want to go on my own. I was quite content to work for the old man.
Yeah.
And he was a good-natured man, good-tempered. We got on very well. I had 2 brothers. One went to Canada to seek his fortune. The other one went to Australia. And that was the days when every mother's ambition was to get her sons as far away from the farm as possible. Be she labourer, be she farmer wife. That didn't make any difference. To get them away.
Were you in a very big family then?
8 reared.
Yes.
I was the youngest but one, so you can guess how much I had.
Yeah.
Well, the old man, I got married in 21, the old man died in 22, and I had to start on my own in 23. And I went and asked the landlord if I could have half the farm, 240 acres. Half the farm the old man rented. And so he said I could. Well, then I went and got a couple of neighbours to be guarantor at the bank for £1,000 each. Well, I never understood why they did it, because within 3 years, one of them said he couldn't afford to do it any longer, so I had to release him. He asked me to relieve him of it. Now, blooming funny, I tried everybody I knew. I never had a relation at £1,000 could be guarantor. My wife didn't. And I tried everybody I could think of. I never did. I never did find anybody to be guarantor at the bank for £1,000. So the other man said, well, I'll have to be guarantor for the 2,000.
Yeah.
And I worked on. I had horses cost £9 each. I had cows cost down to £12, £13. And I suppose I just worked on with sheer thrust. I often wonder how I got ahead. But the fact is I did, and at the end of 3 years, I've still got my profit and loss account, because one of these people that stood guarantor was an auctioneer and valuer, and he said he'd like to keep the books for me, profit and loss account, and he charged me 3 guineas a year. At the end of 3 years, you can see the profit and loss account, I was £640, 1 and 9pence better off. But all my neighbours were going broke.
Well, now, how were you different to them? I mean, what was your philosophy of farming, even in those early days?
Well, I can't quite answer this, but I could see 1 or 2 people about our county getting on.
Yeah.
And those particular people in the main had a big turnover, and they were trying all they could to get close to the consuming public. Now, I couldn't but help follow this sort of pattern. And I begun to retail milk. I begun to produce eggs and sell them in the retail business. I begun to grow vegetables and sell them in the local town. And I can't help thinking, and that meant that I had a little bigger turnover.
Turning over more than the ordinary people. You were
It still applies.
adding more value to
It
it.
still applies.
Yeah. When did your actual growth begin? I mean, you started off fairly humbly with those 240 rented acres. When did you actually start increasing your acreage, increasing the size of your business?
Oh, the first thing that happened, I should think about within 4 years of me being in business, The landlord came to me one day. I was filling muck in the yard, and he said, "What are you, Mr. Parker?" And I said, "What do you want, Sir William?" Sir William, to sell us. He said, "We want you to take the next farm, 400 acres."
He came and asked you to.
He came and asked me to. I said, "I can't take the Dean Farm. Whatever you talking about? I got no money." He said, "You shall have it rent-free, and we'll let you have it. We'll lend you the money at the same less rate you can borrow at the bank." Now, I didn't dare do it.
Oh.
I saw 3 men get that farm broke.
Yeah.
Now, within 3 years, there was another farm on the estate came to be let. And I took that. That couldn't be let. And I took that. And I always had an ambition to grow a field of sprouts. And I had the right to do the cultivations. The 25th of March, I took possession at the Michaelmas. This was a common thing in this country then.
Yeah.
And this field came for turnips in the ordinary traditional way. And I thought to myself, I'll put him in with sprouts. I've never grown any sprouts. I've heard it said there's some money in sprouts, and we put them in with sprouts, and we fiddled about, and we had a dry summer. I've often said that there were 16 acres, they came to £100 an acre, and I didn't seem to want for money afterwards.
Really? And this really was almost a turning point, I suppose, was it? This kind of thing.
I suppose. Then I came 2 years after that, I took another farm, and when the war broke out, just the year before the war broke out, we took this farm. This was 1,000 acre then. That put us up to about 2,000 acre. And of course, I never had any sleepless nights. I thought everybody would get paid, and everybody thought my father paid him, and I should pay him, and that was the principle. We went on.
You did this while a lot of other people were losing money. Some of them were going bust. Now, were you conscious during any of this time that you were being ruthless in any way in order to sort of thrust on and increase your business?
I wasn't conscious of it at all, but the men, I think, were, because although I still got some of the men that 2 men that started with me when first farm I took. In fact, they worked for my father's boys. I took them on.
Yeah.
And they tell a story sometimes when there's a fresh man out. You stick it 3 years, you'll get a character last you long as you'll want one in Hampshire. 6 months used to be long enough. Of course, I was a hell of a thruster. I'd been brought up to drive on, and I just couldn't help it.
How much of your farm do you own, this 4,000 acres that you now farm, and how much do you rent?
We own about half of it,
Yeah.
and we rent the rest. I got a job to realise how we've lifted the fertility of this land in 30 years. I just got a job to believe it.
It was really poverty land at that time, you think?
Oh, poverty. Rampants in poverty.
Yeah.
Myxomatosis was the best thing happened.
Yeah.
And of course we had incentive. Oh, a lot of Hampshire was like it. A lot of Hampshire was like it. But there we had the incentive when we were making the profits, and I never knew what to do with profits, only put them back in the farm.
But what's the rotation that you're running here now?
Well, we got to change the rotation according to the land we farm, but we don't reckon to grow wheat any more than twice in a row, or 2 crops of any sort, 0 crops of any sort, more than twice. I think that the most valuable thing a farmer can have is the right rotation he follows. But the farmer's got to dictate the rotation, because some farms are different to others, some men are different to others. Here we grow, the biggest break crop is grass. And I maintain that a lot of England has got to go, state of England has got to go to some sort of rotation of cropping. And the grass has got to play a big part. Look where we're getting to. Wild oats, you're ashamed to go up across the country to for them, aren't you? Now, we haven't got any wild oats.
No.
What sort of a harvest have you had this time?
We've had a very good harvest, but not up to last year. Not quite up to last year, but 300 or 400 weight. We can only record the yields on this farm. We can't record them on the other farms, but wheat got down to 3,000 weight behind spring wheat behind Brussels sprouts, and we got up to 2,700 weight behind broad clover.
But you think there have been a lot of better yields about this year, though, do you?
No, I don't.
You don't? Well, people
No.
say they have.
Yes, but not the people who got an efficient recording system don't. The ones that got it in the heap do.
I see. You think if they put a weighbridge in, they'd be a bit more accurate?
What are you busy at this week? What have you been busy at?
Well, we're just finishing tater digging, but we've got a lot of wheat to put in, and if this weather lasts, we should soon have it done.
Well, of course, we saw a bit of that yesterday because we had a ride round your farm, not in a coach and four, but in a very comfortable Bentley. Very well sprung, wasn't it, David?
Yes, it was. And I was most impressed by your system of ploughing your land and disking it down and drilling it all at the same time. Is this your normal system? I mean, you have 7 or 8 tractors going all on the same field, the whole thing being drilled right behind the plough. I was most impressed with that.
Well, the first question was riding around in a Bentley. It was damn stupid to give all this money for a Bentley and then keep the thing in the shade, so I use it to go where I want to go.
It's quite good over an open furrow, isn't it?
Oh, yes, I thought it went well.
But we have always, I've said several times that neither my father nor 130 people on the pay sheet. Some of them not very good, some of them girls, some of them boys, some men. Now, that it isn't fair to say that we employ 130 men on the farm. There's the maintenance men, that'd take 15. There's the office staff, that's 5. There's people in the packing station, because we've got a egg packing station where all our eggs go into.
Yeah.
There'd be 8, 10 in there.
Even so, you've got over 100 men on 4,000.
Oh, yes, we have. Oh, yes, we have.
Not for me to say, especially talking to a chap like you, but would you say that you were perhaps a little extravagant with labour?
We never got enough men all the week. We got too many men Saturday night.
That's payday, is it?
That's payday.
I thought it must be.
This is a fact. But, you know, getting a job done the right day is a tremendous thing. 15 of these men are Brussels picking every day. They'll be Brussels picking for 6 months. I know we got a lot of labour, but I don't like to see one stood up. I like labour. You can't have too much labour if they're well organised.
You said some of these chaps have been with you virtually since you started. You tend to keep your labour a long time.
We'd like to say that. We're very proud of the relationship between our men and my sons and myself. We've given away 31 gold watches for 25 years service.
What's the secret of keeping people?
Justice and housing them well, which is part of the justice.
But what sort of chap do you think you are to work for? Try and be objective about it. I mean, you say you've been thrusting on. I imagine you demand a good day's work of every man that works on the place.
Well, I'm thinking about my father. He said that his grandfather, I think it was, employed 5 carters. Each one could put a sack of wheat in a wagon, but his grandfather could stand in a bushel and do it. Now, I've never seen this done, but I can only think birds of a feather flock together. Now, our foremen are thrusters like they all been with me all their lives, and they're like me. I often say, well, I wouldn't be foreman for Tom Parker. The tack was never put away. Lorries are going out the yard with Brussels sprouts and taters all times of time, night and day. Now you got to be there to see to it, little or much.
But how does the management of the place work? You've got these 100-odd men, this vast enterprise.
2 sons.
Two
How
sons.
they fit in?
Yes.
Well, you see, I've got to a stage where they used to be with me, but now I'm with them. Now let's get it fair.
Yeah.
And so they got to do the work. And one of them sees to 2,500 acres round about here, and the other one sees to the rest of the land down around Fairham, 8 mile away.
But by your own admission, you say you've always been a thruster all your life. I mean, can you keep out of their way? I know they're almost middle-aged now, I suppose.
Well, this is true. They're as dedicated as I am. And a funny story, the other day I had a friend with me, and I went to Tom, the one in Fairham, where he had 8 tractors at work in a field and 2 drills, and they were ploughing and sowing this ground. I said, I wish you wouldn't plough this ground so deep. And he took a bit of exception. He said, well, we ain't doing any harm, as you ain't doing any good. You plough it about 6 inches. All you're doing is bringing up those big old flints. You plough 6 inches deep and do it properly. And he passed some remark as if he resented what I told him a bit. And when I got away, my friend said, he answers you back, you know, Governor. I said, damn, he's entitled to. He'll soon get old age pension.
What is your role these days, though, in the business?
Now, what do? I mostly, in conjunction with them, have a lot to do with the cropping or the rotation we're going to follow in each field. I often lay it all out, then I discuss it with them. That's one thing I do. What do I do beside? I write about the farm. If I see a man doing something damn stupid, like his implement following the tractor hitched up badly, I don't say anything. I said, whoa. Now, what you're doing is damn stupid. You stand there and don't you move till a foreman comes and puts you right. That goes round the farm like a fire. Now you get to know.
I still think you're a bit extravagant with the amount of men that you've got here, don't you? I mean,
Well,
labour is getting more expensive all the time. Are you going to be able to keep this number of men on the farm?
Well, this is true. This is a fact. But this is worked up to now. So my bank manager assures me and my accountants. So that's number one settled, isn't it? We're talking about building new cottages now. We're talking about building new cottages.
For more men?
For more men. No doubt we shall increase our turnover in some way. We've got a target set to milk 1,000 cows. We look like keeping another 40,000 hens. We look like growing more Brussels.
Before we leave the question of labour and your relationship with your sons and so on, I couldn't help noticing that there's a little sign over the mantelpiece in your drawing room that says, I may have my faults, but being wrong is not one of them.
That was a present from one of the family. But I've always told them all my life the old man mustn't be wrong. And they don't try to prove me wrong. But, that's a bit of a gimmick.
We're coming up to a period just now when we're going to have this labour structure. Wages structure is going to come in next spring, summertime. What's going to happen to all your men when this comes in? Are they all going to be skilled craftsmen or what?
Our grade will be the highest grade. And those who can't stand up the highest grade will get the sack. And there won't be any of them because they'd improve themselves. Now, this is a fact.
Do you reckon that farming is in good heart now? I'm talking about nationally.
I never saw Hampshire farm so well. I never saw Hampshire farm. I never was. This is true. But there's a lot of farm badly now. Of course there is. There's nothing wrong with farming. There's nothing wrong with farming.
Are you worried about the prospects of the common market?
I'm not looking forward to it. I like the system we've had for the last 25 years of subsidising through the food through subsidies for the benefit of the many. Whether this new import tariff is going to work, we shall see. And mind you, don't think that need be too bad for people. The average isn't very high to beat.
And if you're above average, you think you'll be all right?
If you keep up above average, you're all right. Now, this was so, wasn't it? In the bad times before the war, you had to beat the average.
But this was so for you, wasn't it? Let's go back to those days for a minute, because you succeeded, you grew, you increased your business when other people were failing and going bust. Now, what's
True.
different about you? What's, your abilities or what? I mean, how are you different to other people?
I could only think that I was more dedicated or brought up with more know-how. I couldn't think of anything else.
Do you think you could do the same thing again today?
Yeah, of course I could.
Even in the present circumstances, in the 70s, with rents, interest rates and so on, what they are?
I could take you to plenty of farms in our county where men started with nothing but the bank. And they had an advantage over me because there wasn't this prejudice against the overdraft there was then.
But what drives men like you on? I mean, there are a number of chaps in Hampshire, big farmers like yourself. Well, what drives you on? You can't need the extra money when you get to beyond a certain size.
Well, you would wonder, but what drives us on to do our job better, with a challenge of doing it better, the need for money to expand your business and improve your position for you and your men. And I mean by that, by keeping the cottages right up to date, housing them properly, and giving them the best conditions, the best implements to work with. The money itself doesn't mean anything to a dedicated man.
You've built up your own financial empire here, I suppose you could call it, farming empire. What happens to it? Do you think it'll carry on? You'd like to see it carry on, I assume?
Of course I'd like to see it carry on, but I don't worry much about posterity. If they can't carry on, if they haven't got enough brains to carry on, they deserve to go under and do something different. But the way it's set up, it'll last their time, because I don't own the farms. The farms we rent are all in the name of John and Tom.
Your two sons?
The two sons, because we couldn't go on doing what we're doing unless we could foresee a long lease.
Yes. Even so, but at 76 years of age, you're still wanting to expand, wanting to thrust forward.
Well, I don't know who's the biggest thruster, me or them.
Is there anything you would rather have done than farm? You say farming is the thing you like to talk about and think about and so on, but I wonder, have you ever thought you'd like to have been a doctor or a vet? Or
No. I couldn't think of anything worse. Be called out in the middle of the night by some old lady that something
you call out in the middle of the night to carve a cow before now.
I couldn't think of anything worse. I often had an ambition, and I don't know why I didn't do it. Lack of money beat me, was to have a haulage business.
Well, you've got about 8 lorries out there now, I saw.
This is true. This is true. I think we got 10 lorries.
10 lorries, sorry.
You got a huge business.
Some of them made quite lorries. But if I'd had a haulage business, it was the ready money, you see. You could never get money in the farming world. That's what beat the average man. We didn't handle any money. If I'd had a haulage business, I should have got somewhere.
No telling what you might have done.
Tom Parker, the Guv'nor, who died last month at the age of 86, in conversation there with David Richardson and me across the breakfast table at his home at Droxford in 1971. And to bring the story up to date, since then it's been a question of intensification rather than expansion of the 4,000 acres. They have built the dairy herd up to the 1,000 cows, as Mr. Parker envisaged. The number of hens has been more than doubled, but the Brussels sprouts, which gave the Guv'nor his first real break back in the 20s, have given way to daffodils, and the labour force is down from 130 to under 100. But they still plant their wheat in the same way, the harrows following directly behind the plough and the drill behind the harrows. So the future of the Hampshire farming empire, which the Guv'nor built up over 60 years, seems safe in the hands of his two sons, John and Tom. Meanwhile, I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity of hearing again what has been probably the most popular programme we've ever broadcast in this series, and to be reminded of Tom Parker, a great farmer. Goodbye.
Children and their emotional crises. We look at an A to Z guide for parents with advice on every problem from thumb-sucking to stealing. Author Tom Crabtree will be in the studio to tell you how to cope and what to do. What to do if you can't find a job. Many people, especially women these days, hire themselves. And we've some guidelines for the self-employed woman working from